Hello, Dr. DeVore's APUS history class, third and fourth hour. This is your lecture video, at least the first part of the lecture video, for chapter 1 of the American Pageant book and also the first period of APUS history. Now, the first period of APUS history runs from 1491 to 1607, and it is a very small period of APUS history. So we need to understand that APUS history has 9 different periods, and the first period is only a very small portion of the course. And by that, I mean a very, very small portion of the course. So what we have in this is effectively this period takes up 5% of the APUS course that we have. So it's not we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. There's going to be a project that goes along with this over the Columbian Exchange that will be on Canvas out there for you guys. And we will go through this for a little bit here. And I will try to make these lectures consumable so you don't get too bored with them. I will try to keep them to 20 to 25 minutes at most. And sometimes it'll be a little less, sometimes a little more. Now, I know with you guys' courses in third and fourth hour, you will have to do most of this work on your own, either via the Chromebook or however it is you are consuming this media at home or wherever. So let's just go ahead and get into it. And let's talk about what the major issue is here with this period of Native American life and early colonization. Now, I will try to make these slides available to you on Canvas. I will upload them and they will be there for you to look at, and I will direct you to them. This will be APUSH, APUS chapters 1, and there we go. All right, so what we have here, if you can see on the screen, is over 10,000 years before Christopher Columbus. So Christopher Columbus came to the New World in 1492, the first European to make actual prolonged contact with the Native American tribes located in the New World. And we're going to be talking about places in the Caribbean, and then eventually when we get to Hernan Cortez, we're going to talk about contact with mainland Mexico. But for right now, let's go back even further, 10,000 years before Christopher Columbus. That's right, 10,000 years before Christopher Columbus. So where would this place it? 1492. Let's take 10,000 minus 1492. All right, we go down to 9. So about 8,518 BC. So 8,000 years before Christ or more is when we believe that the very first peoples came to what will be known as the New World. Now, let me just say this. You're going to hear the terms New World and Old World a lot when we talk about this early period of U.S. history. And what is meant by those terms is a bit of a misnomer. That means it's not necessarily accurate, because the Old World, when we talk about the Old World, we mean Europe. And Europe existed at the exact same time as the New World. So they're both old. It's just we're talking about it through a European lens, okay? And when I say a lens, that's the people that are looking at this, and we're Americans, and the way American history is taught is through a European perspective. So we consider Europe to be the Old World. Someone living in China or Japan could consider China or Japan to be the Old World. In fact, probably predate European worlds. So old and new are objective based upon the lens and the perspective you're approaching this at. But for the sake of ease, we will call the Old World Europe and the New World North and South America. Now, a lot of people will say North, Central, and South America. Central America is part of North America. I will say Central America quite often, but when we talk about continents, it's North and South America. And yes, I know there are lots of differences between, say, Canada and Mexico, but they're part of the same continent. So we need to understand that first and foremost. So let's go all the way back to 8,000 whatever BC. Where are these people coming from? Well, the best we can figure is that, and we know, we surmise, and when we do these are scientific guesses, scientific theories and estimates through archaeology, through study of human expansion, through human geography. And if you look up here, I don't know if you can see the arrow, but up here where this big red arrow is pointing, this is the Bering Strait land bridge. There used to be a giant land bridge or an ice bridge that connected Alaska to what is now Russia. And the people that came across that land bridge came from Siberia, the cold part of Russia, and probably also from the areas of the Kuril Islands north of Japan. And these people will immigrate through the ice bridge, and they will come down into North America through Alaska, make their way down the western coast of Alaska into the modern day United States, where some of them will go down the west coast and find their way into Mexico. Others will separate off and find their way into the Pacific Northwest. Others will split off here at the bottom and find their ways over to the East Coast. These are going to be like your Mohican, your Algonquin, your Cherokee. I know we think of the Cherokee living in Oklahoma, but the Cherokee were originally from what is modern day North Carolina. Okay, so we have to understand that there is, especially with North American Native American tribes, there's going to be a lot of people shifting positions based upon westward expansion, white conquest, and we'll talk about that stuff coming up in later lectures. But for right now, let's focus on the people that go south down into Mexico. Now, Native Americans, or as we should probably more properly say, indigenous peoples, the first peoples, the indigenous peoples of this quote unquote new world, they are going to establish their own wide variety of social, political, and economic structures. And it's going to be based upon not only their interactions with each other, but also the environments that they live in. For instance, Plains Indians, your Pawnee, your Ponca, Kiowa, the Sioux, they are going to be, and these are people that are going to live in the upper Great Plains. These are going to be, if you see down here, they're going to be up here that live in what we would call buffalo country. They are going to follow the buffalo. They're going to be more nomadic. People over here in the West Coast, or East Coast, I mean, they are going to become more of small farmers, still somewhat nomadic, but they're going to create a little bit different society. There will be some, leagues that develop amongst these tribes. They are not going to create big empires, but they are going to create confederacies and groupings. And then out here in the West, more spread out, they're going to have their own political systems, their own interactions, and it's all based upon the environment they are surrounded by, how you can survive. Now, when we get down into Latin America or Central America, and then South America, it's also very different. There will be various tribes over time, various groups. There will be the Olmecs, the Toltecs, all sorts of different organizations. But the big three that you should probably know about are the Aztec, which are going to settle in modern day central and northern Mexico, the Maya, which are going to be more down into the southern Mexico, Chiapas, and Guatemala region of Mexico. And then you're going to go down into South America, where you're going to get the Inca. And the Inca are going to be in Peru, Chile, and places like that. And they're all going to be different. The Aztec are going to be a very formal society. They are going to establish a government that is powerful. They are going to envelop or just sort of gobble up other tribes. And the Aztec are going to be different than the Maya or the Inca. So when the Aztec would conquer another tribe or another group in South America or Central America, I guess I should say, they would basically say, you know what, it's okay. Practice your own religions, do whatever it is you were doing before, but you are now Aztec. You are going to pay tribute to us, and if you don't, well, we will kill you, essentially. But you can keep doing your own festivals and things like that. You don't have to adapt our religion. You don't have to adopt our gods. You just have to pay us tribute. This is kind of more like what the United States would be in kind of a regard. Like, yes, Oklahoma can still do its own thing in certain things as long as we are still part of the United States. The Maya and the Inca will be different in that they will actually try to convert the people they conquer into their system of religion and their system of government. Now, the Aztec are more in central Mexico. Mexico City is built upon one of the hubs of the Aztec Empire. The Maya, as I said, are more in the Guatemala region. They all have very advanced and complex governmental systems. This is not, I think there's a belief amongst a lot of 21st century people, especially people that can be a little bit more racist or not 100% understanding of different cultures, that think that, the Aztec, Maya, and Inca were all super backwards. And yeah, in the more older forms of those societies, there were things that happened that were abhorrent, and I'm talking about the sacrificing of virgins, or Aztec priests would put on the skins of their victims, but that dies out. By the time we get to Christopher Columbus coming over, they're not doing things like that. That's sort of like ancient religion stuff. And if you look at ancient religions across the globe, there were things that happened across the globe, even amongst Christianity and other religions, that we would find abhorrent in a modern society. So just like any other religion, any other society, they will change over time and modernize. Now, they're not going to modernize necessarily by way of technology. They're not going to have ships. They're not going to have, guns. There's not going to be sort of these inventions that are going on in Europe, but they do create their own forms of government. They build massive, pyramids and other structures and very amazing feats of architecture. And then, like, even the Inca, one of the things that the Inca were able to do was figure out how to make water run uphill. And yeah, you heard that correctly. They made water be able to go up a mountain. Water goes down mountains, but the Inca figured out an irrigation system that could get water to go up a mountain, which was very amazing. The Aztec figured out, they created champas, which are floating gardens. They figured out how to do that. They had, systems. They were also an incredibly clean peoples. And that's one of the reasons why when the Europeans come over, they're going to bring these diseases with them that are going to be highly detrimental to these Aztec and Incan populations and Mayan populations, and even North American indigenous populations. The estimates range. There are estimates that somewhere between 60 to 90 million indigenous peoples were in the New World at the time of Christopher Columbus's arrival. 60 to 90 million, that's a lot of people. And that's rivaling, other Europe and places like that. That's a lot of people. Now, granted, it's a huge land area, but that's still 90 million people is a lot for this era. By the time we get to the 1600s and 1700s, that number of 60 to 90 million had been reduced anywhere between 6 to 10 million people. 6 to 10 million people. So if we say that there were 90 million people, and then it went down to 10 million people, that means that nearly 80 million people died. Some of those through warfare, but the vast majority of them died via European diseases or harsh treatment by European landowners in the New World. But the vast majority were diseases, and the number one disease amongst them was smallpox. Horrible, horrible disease, smallpox. Now, these ancient civilizations, these tribes in the United States, now later the Aztec, the Maya, even the Inca, those people will, when those civilizations fall to Europeans, those people will become Catholics for the most part. And what will happen is Catholicism will take the existing religions of the region, and they will simply layer Catholicism on top of them. And they will say, well, this is how, this group worshiped. So now let's add Catholicism to that. They can keep these celebrations, but let's name it something else. There's a Aztec temple. It's now a Catholic church. For those of you that may be Catholic, if you worship the Virgin de Guadalupe, that is only a New World Catholicism thing. European Catholics don't worship or acknowledge really the Virgin de Guadalupe, but New World Catholics do. Now, the religions of the time were what steeped in something called animism. And animism was this worship of nature, plants, animals, non-human things. And this may sound weird or silly to us, to some people, but it really made sense because it fit their lives. The sun, the rain, the wind, these things kept their lives going. And so therefore they took on a godlike existence to them. Even the settlement of the Aztec Empire was through prophecy. If you've ever wondered why the Mexican flag has a eagle holding a snake on it right in the middle, it's because Aztec prophecy said that the homeland of the Aztec is where they would find an eagle holding a snake. And that's what became basically modern day Mexico City. It wasn't Mexico City at the time, that comes later, but that is where the Aztec will settle and start their civilization in Central America, in the Mexican region that will eventually become Mexico under the Spanish. All right, so if we look at Native American culture, again, they developed different and complex societies that really changed and adapted to their diverse environments. So in the Great Basin, Great Plains area, very nomadic down here. These are more small farmers. In the Southwest, due to the scarcity of things like water and land that was available, good land to work, and even the scarcity of animals at times that were worth eating, you have the development of a trade system and also little cities and things like that. This is where you're going to find people who build homes into the sides of mountains. Wherever they could find cool places to live, they would. And I don't mean cool like awesome. I mean cool like, hey, it's hot here. It's the American Southwest. We want someplace decently cool to live, right? There was no air conditioning. So, the ancient civilizations did not have air conditioning. So in the Southwest, the Pueblo, which will come up a lot, lived in an arid land. That means dry. They relied on irrigation to make their lives sustainable. They had to get water from one place to another to grow crops. They would grow maize and other agricultural products. Maize eventually becomes corn. But when I say corn, I don't mean corn like you guys are used to today. I'm not talking about big ears of corn that are nice and sweet and juicy. I'm talking about these little things that kind of look like the top of wheat plants. If you've ever seen one of those little tiny baby corns on a salad bar or something, it kind of looks like those, but it was really more of a grain that would then be ground down into a paste or into a powder and then turned into masa, which would then be used to make bread-like substances, tortillas, things like that, that would sustain them. The diet of these people in this region, when it came to the meat, it would be poultry, chickens, or goats a lot were the main meat sources. Because until Christopher Columbus and the Spaniards, there are no cows, there are no horses. Those things don't exist until after 1492 in the New World. And we'll talk about that in another part of this lecture, the second part of this lecture. In the Great Basin or the Great Plains, the Lakota Sioux are the big players in this region. Now, you might be like, well, aren't we in the Great Plains and aren't the Cherokee huge players? The Cherokee aren't in the Great Plains until after Andrew Jackson in the 1820s. So in earlier times, it's about the Lakota Sioux, it's about the Pawnee, the fights between the Sioux and the Pawnee, it's about the Iowa, the Ponca, the Kiowa, those groups of Native Americans. And they didn't really have the natural resources either because they lived in colder climates. The growing seasons were short. And so the important aspect to their life were buffalo or bison. And basically the Sioux would follow bison, they'd follow the buffalo herds, and that's how they subsisted and sustained their societies in that area. Then on the Atlantic coast, I shouldn't go over there. Over here in this region, if you look down here, you've got the Cherokee, you got various other, you got the Powhatans, you got the Wampanoag up here, you got the Mohawk or Mohican, you got also the Miami Indians, the Shawnee, and Shawnee, Cherokee. These are tribes synonymous with Oklahoma today, and those will move to Oklahoma during the presidency of Andrew Jackson and Indian removal. But on the Atlantic coast, you have a mix of agriculture and hunter-gathering societies. They will establish more permanent villages than those other areas. Now, the Southwest will have permanent villages because they're going to build irrigation systems. These Eastern Coast Native Americans are also going to have permanent systems. They're going to be small farmers. There's good farmland there. There's also access to fish. There's also access to deer. They're not going to follow buffalo herds because they're going to have the food to sustain themselves either by fishing or through agriculture that the Plains Indians really just didn't have. There will be the formation of the Iroquois Confederation in this area, and that's going to be a banding together of Native American tribes. That's going to be the closest thing to a sort of little empire or any sort of government that brings people together in North America, or in the what will become the United States, not North America, because Mexico is part of North America. They don't have those big empires, is what I'm trying to say, like the Aztec, the Inca, and the Maya. Instead, it's more small tribal systems that develop there. Okay, so what you should take away from this lecture is that the Old World was populated way before Christopher Columbus showed up. And it's not necessarily the Old World. The Old World also had complex systems. The Old World had people who knew what they were doing. The Old World was not simplistic. There were massive empires, but people's regions and what was around them dictated how their lives would be. If you had to go chase animals, you were going to be nomadic. If you could farm, you were going to be sedentary. In Latin America, with the Aztec, Inca, and Maya, those all were different too. None of which were the same, but they were empires. Okay. Well, guys, answer any questions that go along with this video. Thank you for listening, and I will see you later.